white Americans have a criminal history. They have a criminal nation. The nation is built on criminality and murder and exploitation. It is a part of their collective psyche. The United States is a mafia government. No one has done more damage and degradation and murder, rape, and robbery than Europeans. Yes. Therefore, in order to escape confrontation with their true criminal nature, they must accuse others of being criminals. What we call projection. They must become obsessed with the criminality of other people. And black folk become those other people, you see. But as Clinton Cox say, you called the Indians savages so you could behave toward them what? Savagely. That's the function of stereotyping, you see. If I call you a criminal, then I can treat you what? Criminally. I don't owe you justice. In fact, shooting you in the street is justice. We know you are already a criminal. Why should we bother to take you to trial? Yes, that's what it is. We're doing a service. We're saving the taxpayers' money. What have we lost? A criminal? What are you complaining about? Yeah, this is the deal. What does it mean then? When you can become, then often people, in order to escape certain problems, become obsessed with other issues to the point where they don't have time or the energy or anything else to think about anything else. They don't see anything else. So I can forget my self-hatred. I can forget my self-alienation if I concentrate on how much I love myself. But this is a bad kind of love, you see. It's not the right kind of love. If I concentrate on what? How great I am. If I concentrate on making other people see what? How great I am. You see? And therefore, my 24 hours a day, I'm obsessed by projecting my what? Greatness. And I will, but that greatness is coming out of what? Hatred and inferiority. And since I'm greater than everyone else, I must make everyone else superior, in what? Inferior to me. In fact, I can only love people who attest to my superiority. I can only love a woman who 24 hours a day maintains my superior ego and states that she is in need of leadership and guidance. And I'm her leader. I may be emasculated in the world, but in my house, I'm the king. And at any moment she indicates that I have feet of clay, I shall use them to stomp her. Yeah, this is the kind of thing we have here. Yeah, and it goes the other way too. You know, make me a goddess and lay at my feet all kinds of sacrifices. Yeah, yeah, live through me. And any moment that you don't hold this up, I'm going to react with anger and call you all kinds of names and problems. That's the issue of narcissism. Then you have the phallic character, flaunts his masculinity through success at work or conquest over women, constantly seeking confirmation of his potency, identifies himself with his penis. Ultimately, though, ladies and gentlemen, this is a man who's afraid of castration, who really thinks his balls have already been cut out from under him. Therefore, he needs a constant confirmation that he has them. Kind of reminds me again of the black and white video. What was that boy trying to grab down there between his legs? What are so many black men grabbing that all the time out there? Yes, seeing if it's there. Yeah, where is it? In other words, then, that relationship can move into a master-slave kind of relationship. A relationship that tries to use and exploit other people. A relationship that, in a sense, duplicates the social relationship that the man has. Don't worry about it. It'll be all right. At the end, you have people then who have a problem with lovability and are in constant need of reassurance. So what does this all imply? We don't have time to go into it all. What does it all imply? What does it roll out to be? It means then that if we are to transform the relationship between black males and black females and transform the nature of black life, period, we must transform the American system itself. Yeah, you can't get around that. Oh yeah, we have to if we are going to say that living in America, being black in America, creates a good deal of the problems that we have, then we must change America as a part of changing what? The problems. Now, it doesn't mean that we focus outside of ourselves, because one of the best ways of changing America is by what means? Changing ourselves. I've told you before that we are not only the creation of whites, we also create them. That they cannot be what they are unless we are what we are. And therefore, if we engage in self-transformation, we engage in the transformation of the nation and ultimately in the transformation of the world. This is what I'm saying again about an African-centered education. That more deeply than all, in terms of an African-centric education, is that we are not creating a revolution in America as much as we are creating a revolution in ourselves. But that revolution in ourselves is a revolution in America. And that's why we look at ourselves and transform ourselves. It means then that we must gain a perception of what is real. Maladaptive behaviors flow from the inability to operate in terms of what is real in the world. Where are we as African people? What is our real history? What is the real nature of this social system? And how does that reality intrude into our lives? We must come to know ourselves. If we do not know ourselves, we lose control of ourselves. We don't know why and for what reason we behave as we do. We must exercise control over ourselves. We must come to esteem ourselves and accept ourselves. To a good extent, the problems that we talk about all the time are problems that flow from people avoiding themselves, escaping their real selves, and creating mechanisms and machinations to facilitate their escape from themselves, and using other people and abusing other people in their escape from self-acceptance, in their escape from their real African selves as a people. And therefore, if we're going to stop abusing and using other people and using them as objects and so forth, then we must come back into self-acceptance and come back into reality. We must gain the ability to form affectionate relationships. And ladies and gentlemen, the ability to love and how to love is taught. In this system, we are taught that it's something that occurs accidentally and spontaneously. That is not true. Even romantic love, with all of its shivers up and down your spine, and all of this business about you can't eat and you can't sleep and, you know, you toss and turn all night.
We have let another people's spirit take possession of our bodies and take possession of our minds. When we speak, it is not with our African voice. It is with the voice of that demonic presence that uses our lips to speak its own language. Yes. Yes, we have to recognize this. We are possessed. And if we are to transform ourselves and to transform the nature of our relationship with those who are our masters, we must engage in an exorcism and clear the devils out of our minds. And at this time, then, it'll pay you to read a little bit about demonic possession. And we have to be demonically possessed. Because if we talk about black-on-black violence, self-defeating behavior, self-destructive behavior, then we could not be possessed by a beautiful and wonderful God. We must be possessed by demons. It's interesting to look at the literature on possession. We have a couple of types of possession. One is called a somnambulistic possession. Somnambulistic. Soma, in this instance, having to do with sleep. You hear it in the word somninex. You know, ambulistic, to move around. Ambulatory, right? So we're talking about people who are what? Sleepwalking. They're not awake, but they're walking around. The body is moving, and it is walking in an organized fashion and walking systematically, but the person is still asleep. And in somnambulistic possession, then, the individual's original self has been repressed and displaced, and the spirit, and he identifies with the spirit that possesses him. And his I and the spirit's I are one and the same. We have a lot of that here today. Where the spirit that has been implanted in us, we have taken to be us, and we've identified with it. That is why in defending ourselves, we end up defending the people who rule over us. In defending our ego, we end up maintaining the social structure that has destroyed our ego to begin with. And you see it in our youngsters, who will fight and kill in the name of respect, and fight because their egotistic orientation has been insulted. And therefore, in defending their ego, they do not kill the people who destroyed their ego. They kill each other and maintain the one who destroyed them in the first place in power.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger. I am the danger.
So we have some of our people here who think then that slavery was back then and had nothing to do, and had nothing to do with them. Ladies and gentlemen, we've never escaped slavery. We still share the slave consciousness of our great-great-grandparents. We are of the same mind to a great extent that they were. We have not advanced beyond these people. How can I say that? I generally ask a series of questions. You say that slavery has nothing to do with you and slavery was back there. And I ask you the question then, what language do you speak? When did you learn that language? Was that the language African people were speaking when we were taken into slavery in America? In other words, the language we speak at this moment is what? A slave language. The language that our slave ancestors were forced to learn.
And we still speak it, and you can still hear the pidgin, the Creole, and the other kinds of stuff in our language right at this moment that they had to go through. That language, with its words defined by history and by an experience, is the language we use today to guide our behavior. It's the language we use today to talk to ourselves. It's the language we use today to learn about ourselves and to learn about the world. It's the language today we use to try to understand ourselves. Is there no wonder then that we are still confused? So we have not escaped slavery because we are still using a slave language, and we speak the language of slaves. What kind of food do you eat? You say soul food? Was that the food of African people? Slave food. The food that we find most satisfying, the food that we find that sticks to our ribs, the food that we call down home, a food that we learn to eat in the quarters. And yet we dare say that we have escaped slavery, that we have nothing to do with those people back there, that was back there. When our whole very social life and social relationships, our very definition of ourselves as a people, our very attempt to commune with ourselves is mediated by the food of slaves. Understand what I'm trying to get at? And how can you say that you exist in a different consciousness from another people? What kind of uniforms are we wearing? Huh? What kind of clothes are we wearing? Were these the clothes of African people? Huh? This is what we got to look at. Yes. What is this to say then that we've escaped slavery? What kind of names do we respond to? Yes. Yes. Tamikas and all these other things we got going out here. What kind of names do we identify with? Why is it that African names sound strange to us now as a people, and yet we dare say that we have a different consciousness from our great slave grandparents? How can we say that? We are still of the same consciousness, and we are still in the same position because we are still servants of the white man. And our reason for being in America is to serve white folk and to generate wealth for them. And there has been no change at all in terms of our relationship to these people. The values that we pursue are slave values and the values of servants. The social relations that we create and interact with were built and developed during the periods of slavery. We have not escaped it at all. But it is time for us to change the slave consciousness, this consciousness of servitude that is still too much with us today. And ultimately, we ask the question that's closest to home for a lot of people. When we claim that we've escaped slavery, and the slavery was something back there which had nothing to do with us today. And then I ask you the question, what kind of God do you worship? What's the name of it? Who taught you to praise him? Was this the God you were praying to before you were brought to these shores? Was this the religion you had before you were brought to these shores? Can you name one African God? How can you then, who define yourself, the very essence of yourself and the very essence of your soul, and organize the very nature of your life here on earth, based on a God handed to us by our slave masters, claim that you have no slave consciousness and are not related to slavery.
All right.
In other words, then, ladies and gentlemen, we are not Africans.
All right.
We are possessed by spirits and demons. We have let another people's spirit take possession of our bodies and take possession of our minds. When we speak, it is not with our African voice. It is with the voice of that demonic presence that uses our lips to speak its own language. Yes. Yes, and we have to recognize this. We are possessed. And if we are to transform ourselves and to transform the nature of our relationship with those who are our masters, we must engage in an exorcism and clear the devils out of our minds.
When you have an identity, it is difficult for another person to impose a set of values on you. Because having a positive identity and a solid identity is a defense against being penetrated by alien forces. A positive identity functions to locate us in the world, in space and in time and in history. A positive identity gives us a sense of purpose and a sense of direction. A positive identity provides us with self-knowledge and direction. A positive identity provides us with a sense of belongingness. When we say we are African, we are not merely identifying ourselves as individuals. We indicate that we belong to a people, to a culture, to a nation, that we belong to a system of values, a system of perceptions, a system of behavior, folkways and mores. A system, an identity permits us to cooperate with other people. It permits us to understand what role we must play within a particular group. An identity permits us to know our own interests. An identity permits us to provide ourselves with an evaluative system, permits us to evaluate what is going on in the world. An identity provides us with a defense against possession. I've often said that we cannot be African and be slaves and subordinates of other people at the same time. We cannot be fully identified and at one with our African identity and be subordinate to another people. The European, of course, recognized this immediately. That is why when we talk about our slave history, we often talk about the destruction of African culture. We talk about the rewriting of black history as an attempt again of destroying the African culture and an African personality. We recognize that the destruction of that personality, the separating of us from our culture, the separating of us from our history, is a separation of us ultimately from our identity. It means a split and a schism is created in the personality. When a schism and a split is created in the personality, the individual is made exceedingly uncomfortable. It is the first rule of brainwashing. When you wish to brainwash a person, when you wish to transform their personality, you break them from their old personality. You break them from their old moorings. You make them question and doubt their previous culture and their previous learning. When you get them to begin to doubt themselves, when you get them to reject their culture, when you get them to see their past lives as negative, when you get them to feel ashamed of that past life, when you get them to feel guilty of that past life, and any good brainwasher knows this, and you check out the Moonies and any other brainwashing organization, you will see this process being put forth. Once you get that, the individual then is left in a tremendous state of confusion, in a tremendous state of ambivalence. That state is painful. It motivates the individual then to seek some kind of relief, to seek some way out. Then it becomes the function of the brainwasher to say, if you follow my way, if you accept my definition, if you do it the way I say do it, if you look at it the way I say look at it, if you value it the way I say value it, then you will feel better. See how happy we are. You know, often in these quasi-religious brainwashing places, you see the people running around smiling, and they're all glory, and they're all happy, and they're all loving, and they're all, you know, and here's this confused person cut off from family, cut off from his community, cut off from everything he's known, and is filled with pain, and yet these people seem to be so loving, they seem to be so brotherly, they seem to be so sisterly. Then let me get what they have. And of course these people are here to say, see, if you thought the way we thought, if you look at things the way we look at it, you'll be happy, you'll be one, you'll be accepted. Then often the individual then accepts the values and the orientation of the brainwashing group, and then becomes a part of that group. The splitting then of the African personality is a necessary process in inculcating into that personality an alien personality, an alien spirit, creating the personality of servitude. It makes possible then, in that African personality, that is the split African personality, makes it possible then for the African to begin to believe the lies, to accept the European distortions, to accept European reality, to accept then the stereotypes the Europeans have projected. And it's very interesting as you ride the subways today, and it becomes an embarrassing event to watch our youngsters use the degrading term they use again and again, so loudly, so unself-consciously. When I grew up, the idea of using this term in public, the idea of letting white folk hear you using that term, letting any other group of people hear you referring to yourself by that term, was unbelievable. But now this seems to be the coin of the realm. And we hear it all the time, yeah, that nigga this, that nigga that, and you know, it just goes again and again and again. People must have been destroyed in many ways to talk about themselves in public and to be this way so loudly and so clearly. You must then break the African person from his African identity in order for this to happen. And this, of course, is what happens. Nature abhors a vacuum, we say. In other words, where there's a vacuum, there's an attempt for that vacuum to be filled in some way or another. And of course, we see that when we suck sodas with a straw, we create a vacuum, of course, and that vacuum sucks into it whatever we are drinking. When you create a vacuum in the personality by separating the African personality from its African identity, then there is an attempt for that personality to suck into itself something else, to fill its emptiness. When the European then is in control of information, when the European is in control of so-called knowledge, when the European is in control of so-called reality, in control of definition and so forth, it will be these things that are sucked into the African personality. When the European projects lies as truth, there will then be these lies sucked in through the vacuum of the split African personality and accepted as truth. And then this personality, these sucked in lies, these sucked in perceptions, these sucked in distorted views of reality will take on a life of their own. They will take on a structure and an organization and represent themselves as a personality. At that point, the African personality becomes possessed by a spirit. When we hear, as I said earlier, about the black boys and our children talking that language on the subway and speaking the way they speak, in a way, it is not they who speak. It is the spirit in them that speaks, using their mouths, using their bodies. When they then believe the lies that they cannot learn as well or better than any other people, when they are afraid to try, when they are afraid of failure, when they are afraid of success, when they are afraid to challenge the European. You see, we talk about racism, but I don't think we are yet really ready to do something about it. Because doing something about it in the ultimate sense means preventing and neutralizing the perpetrators of racism. Ultimately, it means, ladies and gentlemen, removing the Europeans' ability to perpetrate racism in the world. Not getting the European to love us, not getting the European to so assimilate with us or to accept us, but getting the European in a position where no matter how scandalous he is in terms of us, he can do a doggone thing about it. Because we then have the power in and of ourselves to defend ourselves against his insult and against his slander. Ultimately, then, the removal of racism from the world would mean the ultimate neutralizing of European power. But many of us are not ready yet to take on that task. Many of us are still afraid that we are not up to that task, that we cannot defeat the European, that we cannot neutralize the European. So we have opted for some kind of armistice, some type of suing for peace, some type of getting along, because we figure that is the best that we can do. Then we in this sense, then we will be continued to be possessed by an alien spirit. And that alien spirit then will speak to us. When we then fail to believe in ourselves as people, it is because that spirit has taken over us, and it says to us what the European has said: you can't succeed, you can't run the world on your own, you're incapable of having a culture. Without us, you wouldn't have VCRs, you wouldn't have TVs, because see, you're not technical, and you know you love it. You wouldn't have compact disc, and you know you're into your music, you see, and you wouldn't have this, and you wouldn't have that. Europeans are mathematically gifted, and you are not mathematically oriented, and Jews can count money, and you don't know how to keep money. That means that there's a spirit in us, and that spirit whispers to us, and it keeps us from attempting many of the things that we should attempt. This can only occur when we have been separated from our African selves.
Sanchez, we ready? Are we ready?
Man, sit your ass down.
I guess not.
Psychology, we call it love for the aggressor, identity with the aggressor, where one loves the one that persecutes them in an unhealthy sort of way. But this is a part of what Freud talked about when he talked about the Oedipus complex. That his theory is that the boy comes to be like his father.
I ain't no black.
Because the boy hates his father. And it's a very interesting kind of concept there. He wants to get rid of his father. Then how does he come to be like his father, we say? Because if he comes out and actually tells his father how much he hates him, the father might do what? Destroy him. You see? He's dependent upon his father. He needs his father. And that need and dependency, that fear that his father will hurt him or destroy him, the fact that he feels weak relative to his father, then sets him up to say, I can't express my hatred. I can't express my hostility. And yet this hostility is tearing me apart. This hatred is tearing me apart. How can I get rid of it? And he gets rid of it by saying, then I'll do what my father says do. I'll be like my father. If I think the way my father thinks, if I behave the way my father behaves, if I look at the world the way my father looks at it, if I have the values that my father has, if I be as much like my father as possible, then I will escape my father's punishment and death. If I can show my father that I love him, that I'm the same as he, then my father will not victimize me. And it's a peculiar theory, but it has some interesting aspects about it. To a good extent, the relationship between African peoples and white people is a father-child relationship. We think of ourselves as weak, powerless against the white man. We see him as the source of gifts, the source of blessing. He gives us the jobs. He gives us the protection. He gives us the food. He provides the water. He provides the housing. He provides this. He provides that. You see? And we also think because we're weak, we cannot go directly against him to destroy him, even though he hurts us, even though he degrades us, even though he frustrates us, even though he enslaves us and discriminates against us. We still don't quite get up the drive to say, well, I'm going to destroy this person who degrades me and who is destroying me. Because we feel as if we need him in some kind of way, that we can't live without him. He also tells us that you suffer because you have a different color. You suffer because you have a different kind of shaped nose. You suffer because you have a different hair. You suffer because you come from Africa. You suffer because you don't look like me. And what do we go for then? We say, well, if I want to get out of this suffering, then I should be as much like him as possible. As a matter of fact, if I get so much like him where he can't tell the difference between me and himself, he won't punish me anymore. I will no longer be what? A victim. So therefore, we are motivated then to come outside of ourselves, to move toward the person that is destroying us and victimizing ourselves, hoping that if we can get them to love us, and if we can show them how much we love them, and if we show them how much alike we can be, we can get them to not see us as colored. You know, look at me, don't look at me as a black person, look at me as a person. You know, to abstract us. In other words, in order for other people to love us, they must not see the blackness of our skins. They must see some kind of invisible abstraction before them. True love is a person who sees you for all of your blackness and your big lips and your big nose, and you kick your head and still does what? Loves you. If they got to remove your hair and they can't see you standing before them as a black person, they don't love you, ladies and gentlemen. For a person to say, I don't see you as black. How could you not see me as black? I'm standing right in front of you. But this is the kind of thing we want these people to do, to abstract who we are. And therefore, if we become a distraction, that means we leave who we are. We have to come outside of ourselves.
I know,
That's why we want to be educated with them and educated like them and so forth. We want to not identify in any way with Africa, African people, because to identify with Africa and African people is to suffer. So consequently, we even come to hate ourselves and come to hate our people and come to love the people who destroy us, but it's an unhealthy kind of love. We come to resemble those people. We want to take their values and their orientations toward life. And when they accept us, we escape from our self-hatred. And therefore, we look as if we look for their love to take us outside of ourselves as a people. So consequently, even when we don't love them, when we love even within our own group, we still often look for a kind of love that will take us outside of ourselves, which means then that we become false and unreal and untrue and dishonest and deceptive, unknowing. And how can you develop then a beautiful household and beautiful children and a beautiful community with a love based on this kind of hatred?
Says
We are killing each other in order to maintain this system. We have let ourselves become possessed by a spirit such that when we become aggressive, we aggress against the self instead of those who are the source of our aggressive orientation. We talk a lot as a people about self-hatred. Self-hatred is a personality configuration. It is a form of personality organization. It is an orientation toward the world and toward oneself. Self-hatred, then, is the white man's greatest protection against being destroyed by the black man. To a good extent, self-hatred is the white man's defense mechanism, is the white man's form of self-defense. How can we say that? to a great extent, one function of the personality is to direct energy, to direct aggression, to channel aggression and energy and wishes and impulses in particular directions, to organize feelings, to organize energy, to achieve certain ends. Those things that we hate, often then when we are angry or hostile, we aggress against them, don't we? We attack them often. We destroy them. Then we have a problem, don't we? If we attack the things we hate, if we attack the things toward which we hold hostility, when we are overly frustrated and when we are angry, then what happens if that thing we hate is ourselves? It means then, ladies and gentlemen, that when we become frustrated and angered as a people, when we are overwrought by feelings of hostility, and our self-hating personality seeks to channel that hostility and channel that aggression, it's going to channel the aggression right back on to the self, because that's the thing we hate most. So consequently, black anger then becomes a conduit for black self-destruction, for black self-defeat. The object of our hostile, aggressive feelings becomes ourselves. And you can see then how the white man is protected by that personality structure, right? While he stokes our anger, while he stokes our hostility, while he stokes our frustration, and while we get mad and we want to strike out, when we decide to strike out and aggress, we strike out and aggress against the self. And by doing so, he is left untouched and unscathed. And therefore, our self-hatred becomes his principal means of defending himself and of maintaining himself. One of the things that frightened him most about the Ferguson case was that Ferguson's self-hatred mechanism broke down. Unlike many deaf, dumb, and blind Negroes, he knew who his enemies were. And so when he got angry and hostile, instead of going out to drink himself to death, instead of going out to smoke crack and destroy himself, instead of going out to killing someone who looked like himself, instead of going out to commit suicide and put himself in a place to be destroyed by somebody else, he went directly to the source of his frustration. And this is what frightened those people. They were wondering, how many more are there like that? And are they increasing? Yes.